Kiev'de meydana gelen olayların iç yüzünü çok iyi bilen, hatta organize eden Mike Skillik'le beraberiz. Kendisi bize buradaki olayların perde arkasına aktaracak.
The Maidan actually, and then we went into war with Russia. And that's pretty much why I'm here. At the moment I'm working more in politics than in actual war because our units have been pulled from the front lines and the regular army is being a little more in the front lines now than we are.
Kiev'de gördüğünüz gibi göstericiler polislere karşı direniyorlar. Caddeyi ateşe verdiler, lastik yakarak. Polisler hemen arkada. Bu dünkü barikatın bir 100 metre gerisindeyiz biz.
You know, when this war started in the eastern Ukraine, most of the volunteers and a big bunch of the Ukrainian army had no training. I met one army guy, he was in the army for 3 years and he has been shooting with his rifle 3 times. So what we did in the beginning was that we, in this very place that we are now, we trained all our soldiers. And then we moved to eastern Ukraine, where we also trained them for several months before we had our actual big war operation. In the very beginning, it was me, another Swedish guy, some Ukrainian guys who actually had some military experience. We just took whatever we had. We didn't even have enough guns for everyone, so we were training with sticks, just to get the proper tactics, how to move in groups. And as that prolonged...
Bakın bu tarafta göstericiler var. Polisler bunlara gaz bombası atınca caddeyi komple ateşe verdiler. Polislerin gelmesini engellemeye çalışıyorlar.
Some support from the Ukrainian state, where they provided us with weapons from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And then we started to do actual shooting exercises, and it took about 6 weeks of everyday training, 12 hours straight, to get us to a condition where we would be to at least be considered the minimum amount of soldiers. And that was enough actually to fight in our first big operation, which was Mariupol, the liberation of it. And it was only possible to do all of this because all of them were prepared to die and to fight for the country, which everyone understood more or less is being invaded by Russian interests. Because in the beginning it was not really, you know, the Russian army didn't go through the border. They supported the separatists with weapons and so on. So, but everyone knows that Russia was involved because we saw the actions in Crimea. So we know that if we didn't train for all of this time, if we didn't make the best we could, there would be no Ukraine. There would be only Russia. As I come to the Maidan, in the beginning it was, as you say, it's just people start to make the demonstration. It was fairly peaceful. There were still beatings and abductions by the police, but it wasn't that bad. The really bad event started when the Berkut, its ex-special police of Yanukovych, kidnapped and killed some students. That's when it started to get ugly. So what they were doing is they came to this Maidan, the football hooligans, the nationalists, guys who had prior army experience, and they became the soldiers of the Maidan. But you didn't see any of these really extreme violence in the beginning. They started to build barricades, basically built on what they find on YouTube, what would be most effective. And they learned that if you burn tire, the smoke will make it harder for soldiers to see what to shoot at. That's why they start burning tires. It's the same tactic as the army would use with smoke to make it harder. And they also in the beginning used wooden shields and chains. So they didn't have any weapons. The weapons came at the very end of the Maidan, where the Berkut started to shooting. Some guys steal the actual guns from the Berkut. I only seen so far one exception where someone brought his own rifle. It was when they're shooting from the old Union House on Maidan. So all of them, they learned by doing mistakes, of course, which have people killed from their side. They died trying to figure out the right tactics. And also by Googling, like how to make a Molotov. I remember one of my friends was in the Maidan where they torched the very first APC on the Maidan. And just 3 hours before, he started Googling to look on YouTube how to make a Molotov. So without internet and of course help from guys who was in the army, even guys who was loyal to Yanukovych in the National Guard, decided to change side because they didn't want to fight against their people. So they said, listen, we will not support Yanukovych, we will take our knowledge and our equipment and go to the side of the demonstrators.
Gibi kendi yaptıkları mancınıkla polise vuran taş atıyorlar.
Kind of money. Many Ukrainians. It's Ukrainian diaspora. It's a big community. I think it's like the biggest in Canada, with 2 million Ukrainians living in Canada. Same in Turkey. We have the Crimeans moving to Turkey, and they make a lot more money than in Ukraine. So what they were doing when they couldn't fight on the Maidan, they started to ship whatever money they could find to friends and relatives in Ukraine to support them to be able to live and work on the Maidan. Able to train the Maidan fighters. My job here in the beginning was to train the actual soldiers who fought against Russia. But as I said, people came from all over the world, Ukrainians who lived in the US, who was in the French Foreign Legion, who was politicians in Europe or Canada and so on. They came to Ukraine to help their people in what they saw being a rightful revolution. So you had except for the fighting that was carried out by the football hooligans, the nationalists, those who were prepared to die for Ukraine. Except for that, we had massive amounts of people coming from all over the world who was Ukrainian. And they brought with them money, experience, knowledge.
Yardımcı gibi olarak tekrar meydanın yan tarafında bulunan olaylar olduğu caddedeyiz. Burada sabahtan beri olaylar sürüyor. Bir yandan göstericiler ateş yakıyorlar. Diğer yandan da polisler bu tarafa hem gaz bombası atıyorlar.
And then, of course, you had the political discussions being not that good, though. So you could say actually that the whole world was involved in the Maidan, but the hard work and the know-how was provided by Ukrainians, either in Ukraine or anywhere else in Europe and the world. On the Maidan time, there wasn't any actual military trainings, but there were, of course, training for medical purposes. There is several secret hospitals in Kyiv. They are not active anymore, but basically guys from the US, from Canada, they would train medics because so many people, thousands of people were hurt on the Maidan. And you couldn't take them to a normal hospital because then they would be arrested or even worse, killed. So in terms of training from there was maybe 10,000 policemen, but there were 100,000 demonstrators. So they would use their advantage in number and just push forward. there was no actual outspoken, at least to my knowledge, outspoken organizations who would come and say, we are from this and that organization, because it was a sensitive time. To make a revolution, it's not legal, so no official organization could say, we are coming and supporting this mass. So there would be individuals, pretty sure, from different organizations, of course, but they would come as an individual, not as an official body of an organization or a country. I think same during the demonstrations in Turkey. Social media always have, it has the power to connect people, and it was used very, very well. And I know that the US after this had some courses in Ukraine how to connect people through social media. So, but especially it was used, it's called the VKontakte. It's the Russian counterpart to Facebook. And Twitter, of course. Ukraine on Twitter, on some parts Facebook, not that much. On VKontakte in specific. And yeah, I would say it wouldn't have been highly likely it would have been a success unless they had the Twitter, VKontakte and so on to their exposure, because it played a crucial role. And it's been that all through, you know, in the Arabic Springs, they use social media. In Turkey, they use social media. Was because in Ukraine it had the political will of Europe and the US, of course, to have a regime change. Europe and the US wasn't interested in having Yanukovych. So, of course, they would support a change of president and the government. So I would say that's the difference, that there was a political interest. Normally what we would focus on would be to train the new guys into, I would say, fairly decent soldiers at least. They know how to use the most normal tactics, how to work in small reconnaissance group. And on the more advanced level it would be CQB, how to work in combat zones, in cities, on fields. And of course we have the tank training, the artillery trainings. As it goes to sniper training, sadly enough, we don't use it because it takes too long time. It takes minimum 12 weeks to train a good sharpshooter to be a decent sniper. So we haven't put any effort in it, which is sad because that's my profession and I wish we did it. But we were focusing on small groups tactics and fighting in cities. And of course, you know, the big pushes, how to work with artillery, with tanks, together in coordination with the army. So that's what we've been focusing on so far.